Hey everybody, welcome back. We are going to continue on with project 21, which says that rectangular to square or rectangular to rectangular transition elbow. The previous video you should have seen me fabricate the cheeks and the base for it, and now in the second part of the three-part series we are actually going to fabricate the heel for that project. So that's what we're up to next. With regards to fabricating the heel, we're going to look at a few things on this next plan here. And basically in your mind you've got to draw it in reverse, or as the plan says, because it's going to flip itself over and then it's going to fold on there. So we have to have that angle as it is on the plan with the lines up, but when we flip it over, the angle is going to be opposite and match that that same contour of the fitting there, or that same angle in there. So let's go ahead and take a look at this. What we've got is we've got the 8-inch inlet opening on the top in the back side here, and then leaving, as it rolls around here, we're going to have a 6-inch dimension in width leaving, plus the 7/8 or the inch take-ups for your lock former. Ours are 7/8. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to figure out this roll dimension here on that straight section. And I did that using the string, or here I used a piece of tin. So I'm going to take my straight section, not my angled section. I'm going to figure out what that straight dimension is going to be by just simply taking a piece of metal, lining it up with the tail of the unit here, and then rolling that around until we get our distance. And then when we get that distance down to the base, slide that up there a little bit, right there, we're going to cut that off to fit, and I've already done that. So I've got that length figured, and then we're going to flip it over, and we'll do the exact same to the other side with another piece of metal, like a little small 1/4-inch strip of some sort. And once you got them both fitted in there, you get the edges lined up just right, you'll be able to line them up just perfectly with the edges. You'll cut them both off, and now you've got your two different dimensions, because, and yes, they are going to be different because this one's set at the angle. I don't know if you can see that very well, but the angle is going to be longer than the straight section. Okay, so looking at this, I've got two pieces of metal with different dimensions already cut out, and the longer one is going to be set at the angle. So the longer one is going to go up here like that, and the shorter one is going to go down here. That way when I flip it over, my longer angled dimension, when I flip that over, is going to be sitting where it belongs on there. Okay, so sit at something like that for right now. The next thing I want to do is I want to look at the plan again. And if I look at it, I'm going to determine my dimensions as I go here, my length. But I'm going to look and say, okay, I need an 8-inch dimension here, and it looks like 7/8 and 7/8 for the lock former. So that's going to give me a 9 3/4-inch width part. So I went over and I found a piece that was 9 3/4 inches, and I just simply cut it square. And then I look at the other end and I say, okay, I've got 6 and then the 7/8 and another 7/8 dimension onto that. So I'm going to have to mark that one out and then cut that angle after a bit. But before I get to that point, the first thing I want to do is I want to lay out my base 7/8 dimension. So using my scribe, find the 7/8 mark, and I'll drag that down the entire length of the sheet. And you know, my sheet was just scrap, so it's a little bit longer. We'll cut that to length a little bit later yet too. Then I followed it up, and I know that being as I cut my part 9 3/4, that I can mark the top of that edge there again, also that 7/8, just like the last inch or so. The next thing I want to do is I want to figure out my short dimension, the straight dimension here on the part from this radius, which is going to be the shorter plate here, and I'm going to mark that out on the sheet to my length. So I'm going to line that up on the edge, and then we'll take the scribe and mark that. And then I'll follow that all the way across with my square, so hopefully we can see this in a little bit. That should be the edge of the sheet. So if everything works out, and I don't lose which one was which, like I just did, okay, this is the long one. If everything works out at 6 inches, these should be perfectly lined up where they belong. So now that I got this straight dimension up here, I'm going to find out my 6-inch center and establish that point. So I'll pull it out to the nearest foot on that mark, and then we'll find 6 inches between the marks, or rather 6 7/8 off the edge of the sheet, and then add that additional 7/8 on here for the other lock form. So looking at about a total of, looks like I got about 7 3/4 of an inch, and that appears to be right. What I want to do is I'm going to take and verify this dimension, this distance here, all the way down on those marks. And that should be the inner dimension where my final is going to be, where this has to come out. It might have to grow just a little bit. It appears that it may. So we're going to cut this one a little bit longer up here. So when I make that rolled dimension, I've got this set up. So I believe where we left off here, we were laying out the base dimension here on the bottom, which matched the contour of the straight edge. So if we were to flip this over and pull this piece of tin around here, that works out. And also this distance should be the same, if I didn't slide through that, and that lines up. And then I squared that across all the way up for you to see the edge off the sheet using the square. And I put my mark in there. And then I started working on this other edge out here. So we measured our distance in between them to be 6 inches on this end, and over here we need the 8-inch mark plus our additional 7/8 for the lock former. But before I went and cut this off square, what I need to take into account is that because this other side is angled, it is actually going to be longer than the other side. So what we need to do is, with my dimension, my distance here that I rolled out and set that all out and cut that to fit and everything there, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that and set that on there again and verify on my 6-inch mark that it's long enough to do what we need to do right there. So then I marked that edge, mark this edge here. I'm getting ready to do that now at the 6-inch setting, and then I'm going to measure up off the sheet where 6 7/8 comes to, right at that corner. So that will give me, if I pull out to the foot mark, it should give me 6 inches in between the two marks there, the 2 points. Alright, since I got that point there, I'm just going to put a divot in there. And I've got this one back here. You'll notice that front edge is just a little bit crooked from one another. It's about, I don't know, 3/8 of an inch longer here than from the 0 point on the bottom. So it's not a tremendous amount, but it's not a big difference. It's only an 8 to 6 inch transition. So anyway, now that I've got that distance laid out there, I'm going to add on the additional 7/8 to that mark. So just pull out to the nearest random inch, and then we'll measure out 7/8 of an inch. And with a big ruler or a straight edge of some kind, we will mark that from corner to corner all the way down, which basically brings me back up to, I believe, where I left off before. Okay, so I've got a 7/8 on the base, a 7/8 on the top. The angle is a longer section, and I got it transitioned at just a slight angle here, so that should square everything back up when we go ahead and stretch this. So at this point in time, I'm going to go over and take it over to the shear, and we'll cut these dimensions off here, and I'll bring it back. So let's do that now. Okay, here we are at the shear. We're going to cut that angled dimension off the edge of the part, so it will not sit flush against this fence or anything right now, but we're just going to focus on that and get that rough cut made. I don't know if you can tell that, but we got the angle there, and then now I'm going to cut this long angle. Okay, let's go back to the bench. Back here at the bench then, what we've got is we got the original part laid out just as it was that I just got done cutting the two angles on here. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to show you, I'm going to try to demonstrate. I'm going to flip that over onto the part there. And if we set that on our marks down here on the 7/8 and 7/8 approximately where it would be, and if I can hold this and bring this all the way down, you should see them edges line up down here on the bottom how they're supposed to be when we get done rolling this. So anyway, let's go to the next step, which is notching out these corners. So just taking our notcher here, and I got to stop there for just a second because the base, if you recall, has to be a 1-inch notch down here because the lock form has to stop short. So we are going to take our scribe then with the 1-inch dimension on the base, and we'll have to notch that out with either a 1-inch notcher or our tin snips. The back side is a 3/4 inch, so that one shouldn't be no problem. We can just notch that out with our standard notcher and then take the two corners off from there. Oops, we got just a little edge there. Alright, so maybe you can see that better now too. With our 1-inch notch, it's going to stop. The lock form is going to stop just short of the edge there. And when that rolls down, I don't know if I can maybe show it this way too. If I get them lined up on that side, when we pull that up, they should line up right where they belong with those top edges there. Okay, so with that, this piece is ready to go. Let's go ahead and run it through our lock form machine next. Okay, here we are at the lock form machine, just like we've run all of them, tight against the fence, lines up in both sides. Okay, ready for the next step. Back here at the bench, we're getting ready to get this set up to make the roll on the fittings. So I don't know if you can see it, they're really, really small, but I do have the spacers in there, and it's ready to be put into the roller on that scenario. But before I do it, we need to take into account the fact that there is a straight section out here that doesn't get a roll. So I'm just going to take my measuring tape, and from the previous project where I brought those pivot points across, I don't know if you can see that mark right there, we're going to measure that, which is 6 3/8 on that side, and then on the angled side, looks like about 6 1/2. So the straight side, 6 3/8. We'll mark that one, and then 6 1/2 inch with the angle, and then I'll grab a straight edge here, and we'll just kind of mark that across approximately about where it has to be. That should be the straight section with no roll on it. Everything else is going to get the curve for that fitting. Over here at the rolls, right before I get ready to roll this section, what I need to determine is which direction it has to be rolled, and this one has to be with the lines up. So let's slip that in the roller, and we're going to run it square with the square edge versus the crooked edge. Not that it'll make a whole big difference, but it can make a difference. I do have my spacers in there. There are some small ones, but they should work fine. So let's go ahead and run it through the roller. If you have to loosen it, make sure you do so. And then don't forget to stop when you get to that point from the previous mark. All right. Okay, let's pull these pieces of metal out, these spacers out of here for us, and with that, come along now. I probably recommend using a little bit bigger spacer than I used. There we go. With that, we've got a completed roll for our heel to our rectangular to square or square rectangular transition elbow. So hopefully you'll catch me on the next one for assembly. Thanks for watching. We'll catch you later.